we're back.
Welcome to episode 235 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
Paizo just put out the Pathfinder Society Guide for 2nd edition, a new Lost Omens hardcover book. And that's exciting because Perram and I are both Pathfinder Society fans from long back. We are big fans of the Lost Omens line. And we're very excited to dive into this book, which we will be doing in the second half of this episode, even though normally we do the reviews in the first half. For the first half, we wanted to focus on what Pathfinder Society is and really get a feel for how it can be used to bring new people into the game, into role-playing as a hobby and into Pathfinder specifically. So to talk about Pathfinder Society and all of its virtues, we have Paizo's Organized Play Managing Developer back on the show, Linda Zayas-Palmer. Hello, Linda.
Hi, great to be here.
And to fill in for the void of inexperience, what I'm trying to say is that Perram and I can't really pretend to be novice Pathfinders. And so we brought in somebody that is new to the hobby. She's only played one game of Pathfinder. It is cosplayer Meg the Dweeb, Meagan Kelly. Hello, Meagan.
Hi, it's me, the noob.
The polite
the noob
term,
and the dweeb.
The polite term, Ryan, is audience surrogate.
Oh, that's good. But even our audience knows Pathfinder fairly well. So it'll be interesting for them to see somebody and like be nostalgic for the days when Pathfinder Society was new to them.
Just like stars in your eyes and butterfly in the stomachs. Everything is new.
It's also good for audience members who are looking to introduce Pathfinder Society to new players and may not remember what it was like to be new.
So, like I said, Pathfinder Society means a lot of things, both as like it is a very involved program, but it also, this term specifically has in-world and out-of-world meanings. So, Linda, can you just briefly tell us everything that Pathfinder Society is?
Well, that's not a broad question at all, right? So, to be sort of general about it, in the world of Golarion, the main campaign setting for the Pathfinder role-playing game, the Pathfinder Society is an organization of treasure hunters and explorers and archaeologists that goes all over the world looking for excitement and adventure and history. I've heard them compared to Indiana Jones in that sort of their version of archaeology involves a lot more dangerous hijinks and exploration than, maybe real world archaeology would. On an out of game setting, the Pathfinder Society is the name for an organized play program, which has people from all over the world playing in generally short 4 to 5 hour adventures, where their characters are members of this Pathfinder Society. And so they all have this shared background and also this shared campaign and story. And within the Pathfinder Society campaign, one of the great things about organized play is that unlike in a sort of traditional campaign where you have one game master who is running a game for a persistent group of players that it's always like, okay, yeah, these same folks are going to be coming back every week. With the Pathfinder Society campaign, you can play a game with your friends at level 1 and then say, oh, you know what? In the next game I play, I'm going to be playing with this group of people I found online, or I'm going to be playing with this group of people I found at a game convention or something like that. So you can play the same character, but take that character all over the world to a lot of different settings and still expect to have a consistent game experience with a consistent expectation.
Yeah, about 6 years ago, I went to England, and just in case, I brought one of my Pathfinder Society characters. All right, so Meg, that was a lot to take in.
Yes.
Would you like to summarize what you've just heard to make sure you understand?
Oh, Lord. Okay, I'm going to butcher every beautiful word you use when you make me do that. What I got is essentially that you can play without having to have a group of people, which is really cool. Because the amount of times I've played that game once and the campaign kind of fell through. And just because those people are not playing anymore, it prevented me from actually playing. So what you described is essentially you can just find some people either in real life or online and you can just play with them. So to me, that's actually just kind of like perfect. I love meeting new people as is, but also to be able to play a game I love without having the obligation to convince your friends to actually do it. Like I'm starting a group now. It's taken a long time to actually convince those people to do it. So that's just really cool. I didn't know that existed. That's really nice.
Oh, it's existed longer than Pathfinder has existed as a game.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Oh God, I'm so lost.
So that is one of the other things about Pathfinder Society is that it is something you can get lost in because it's got so much lore, so much history, and there's good things and bad things to that. Like when you open the book, say you open the hardcover or you sit down at the table for the first time, and you realize that there's so much there, you can very easily get immersed as long as you don't get lost.
Well, it's nice to have like probably in like guides to actually show you like some lore and stuff, because otherwise it's like for someone who's never played like me, it's just too much to take in.
All right, so Linda, let's say you've met Meg for the first time. Imagine that, and she wants to play some Pathfinder Society. What do you do?
Well, first of all, I'd want to help you find. I want to see if you know what Pathfinder Society is, and now I know you do because I just told you about that. And I want to help put you in touch with a group of people that you could play with. So one of the groups that you have available is you can play these games with your friends. You don't have to find a specific online group for them. There's no like tests or requirements or anything like that to GM a game for Pathfinder Society. If you've got a Pathfinder Society adventure and you got a group of people, then you can run them through a Pathfinder Society game. And if you don't have a group like that who's interested in playing right now, a good place to look would be online. So there's a few great places to look. And what I'd recommend most actually for that is if you go to pfschat.com, that's pfschat.com, that is the invite link to the online Pathfinder Society Communities Discord. And that's a really great place to find, to hook up with players. They have channels on there for folks who are looking for games, and they have a lot of people who are excited to introduce new players as well. Another good website for finding active games is warhorn.net. And that's got a bunch of games that are looking for new players to join them. So those are two great places to go for looking for games outside of specifically recruiting from among your own friends. So for making a Pathfinder Society character, Pathfinder Society characters are really similar to just regular characters made for Pathfinder. So you'll want to take a look at the Pathfinder core rulebook, the ABCs of character creation, ancestry, background, class, and so forth. And once you've built a character for that, there's just a couple more things that are kind of like extra benefits that you get in the Pathfinder Society program. So there are the schools, which are like, how did your character learn? How did they study when they were being a Pathfinder? Did they focus more on like did they focus more on spell casting, or are they more like a studious type, or are they more like a fighty type? Those sorts of things. And there's also something called factions, which are sort of why your character decided to be a Pathfinder. Are they in it for the glory of bringing their fame to the world and exploring? Are they in it because they want to make connections and learn more about different cultures? Are they in it because they want to chronicle history? Are they in it because they want to bring good to the world? Like there's these so you have these different factions that explain what you're doing as a Pathfinder, and all of these are detailed in the Lost Omens Pathfinder Society Guide book, and also in the Pathfinder Society Guide, which you can find a link to on Paizo.com. So those are sort of the general categories that you'll pick from. You don't have to pick these before your first game, because there are sort of defaults in place if you didn't. But if you want to take a look at those before you start, then you're certainly welcome. So to add that extra sort of Pathfinder Society spin on your character.
It also probably helps you build like a character and like what it is going to be inclined to do, and like kind of like, is it going to be chaotic? Is it going to be like helping the lady over there? Is she going to push her and take her money and run, or like just those? But it's true. But those factions and like backgrounds are going to help you kind of like create a whole persona, which is already kind of pre-done for you, which is cool. It kind of removes that whole I need to think. For someone who doesn't necessarily do a lot of storytelling, it could remove that stress of having to think up an entire new character.
Yeah, because the society within the game itself is generally good. They're good adventurers. You can sit down at the table and assume that if you just want to be an explorer, an adventurer type, everyone else at the table has that in common with you. And then you can flesh out your character in different directions from there. We've got a comment in chat from Joe Jungers saying, Pathfinder University, were you a jock, a nerd, or a caster?
I mean, pretty much, right? And another thing about Pathfinder Society is that until you hit second level, you can just keep rebuilding your character in between sessions. So like if you play your first session and you played a gnome wizard, and then you decide after that, you know what, I really want to play like a goblin alchemist or something like that. Poof, your character is now a goblin alchemist. And they've still earned like all the experience points and gold and rewards that you earn with your gnome, but you've changed what they are.
I also find that that's exceptionally useful for new players that are learning the game, where they might like take a feat that they didn't understand, and then when they learn what it does not work with the character they wanted to play and things like that.
Now, Linda, you didn't really go into the pre-generated character options.
Oh, yes, that's a great point. So we also have pre-generated characters. So for all of the character classes, we have level 1 and level 5 pre-generated characters, and we have some for level 3. And you can print them out and just play them, and then you don't have to build your own character. You can still earn credit toward whatever character you want to play in the future, without having to be ready when you come to the session.
Yeah,
That's
really
cool
great
too.
for pickup games in a hurry, or when you go to a convention and your slot you wanted to go to doesn't make, you can grab a higher level character to fit into wherever they can put you.
It's also
I've definitely had that happen too at conventions where I expected to just be running, and because of like some logistical stuff, I had a slot to play, but I didn't bring any characters. So it's like, all right, what do you guys need? You guys want a bard for this table? Okay, I'm a bard. Here we go.
It's also nice. There's like a deceptive amount of information on those iconic character sheets. So you've got the rules, obviously, but you've also got this cool piece of art. So someone coming to the table, maybe playing role-playing game for the first time, it's like, it's not just you're a wizard. It's you're this wizard. You're this guy in these blue robes with this silvery beard. And it's also got his name, his personality, a little bit about him. So it's like you're this kind of curious, a little bit maybe cantankerous guy. And so suddenly now you've also got these role-playing tips. And it guides you in all the different ways to get into the role-playing experience.
And one of the things we do with those... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One of the things we do with those pre-generated characters is we put all of the rules you need to run the character on them, so you don't need a core rule book. You just need that sheet.
That's nice. Like I remember my only game of Pathfinder that I played, what had helped me was definitely the guidance of like my friends, but mostly to actually see what my character looked like. Because I think if I remember correctly, it was a while ago, I played a Ranger Styx, who had a great white shark as a companion, which was pretty cool, not gonna lie. He was called Odin. It was pretty nice. But to actually see what the Styx looked like I had the actual, like they printed out the picture for me and they put it next to like my sheets and everything. I was like, okay, that's actually who I'm playing. It's not just like Meagan. It's not just me on a boat pretending to be a pirate. I'm actually like sort of like winged creature. It was just like, it made it more real. It's more fun.
So when I was which we called a venture officer for Pathfinder Society, which is like volunteers that are running these games anyway, so they kind of get a position of authority within the community of people that are playing the game. And when someone new would come to at the time, game store, and I was running an event, and they showed interest, the first thing I would ask is, what made you interested in playing Pathfinder? So Meg, I assume that you've joined us on this episode because there is some interest in playing Pathfinder. So what attracted you to Pathfinder specifically?
Actually, at that point, I came back from traveling for a long time, and I came home and I kind of like rekindled with old friends. And they were like, you know what, you game a little bit, you play like Skyrim and like RPG games and stuff like that. Have you never thought about like D&D or Pathfinder or any tabletop kind of game? I was like, oh no, like I'm a little shy, I'm a little reserved. I'm like, I'm gonna have to like use a voice. I'm gonna have to like understand all those rules. And he was a savant, like he knew everything. He's like, no, it's fine. Then he kind of convinced me into doing it, and it was that whole like kind of like friction point of shyness. Once I just went over it and I got there, he literally took me by the hand and was like, you're gonna have fun, just like trust me. And we got there and we ate so many like donut holes and so much like junk food, and we just did nonsense for like 3 to 4 hours and like spit of jokes and just created a world and a life that we all did not have and would have no chance of having, because I'm not going to grow wings tomorrow and I'm not going to become a pirate tomorrow. It was just such a like big step for me at first, but it was really a friend that was like, just trust me, you're going to love it. It's going to be fun. You have like all the affinities for it. You're just going to have fun. And I'm so glad I did it. It was just like kind of like a trust fall, and
nice.
Just like did its own thing after that, like now I just want to do it more. So
I noticed you said donut holes. Is that because you were worried our American audience wouldn't know Timbits?
Yeah. As the full Canadian I am, I'm like, I don't want them to feel like not included. So I almost said Munchkins. I'm like, no, it might be like another brand. So just go with donut holes. But Timbits are so good. They're just so good. They were Timbits. All right, they were Timbits.
When I'm talking to new players in the game who've like not heard of RPGs and stuff like that before, one of the things I like to say is that like your character sheet might say these are some things your character is good at, but one of the things that tabletop RPGs bring is that they're not like the list of all the things you can do. Anything you can come up with that's something you want your character to try, like your GM can kind of let you know, oh yeah, that's this skill or that whatever. There's probably going to be something where you can roll a 20-sided dice and see how well you did at the thing. But really, the sky's the limit in terms of what your character can try and what kind of hijinks they can get up to. And I find that the best games are the ones where players do something that the GM didn't expect, and new players are great at that.
Mm-hmm.
Coming up with new ideas and new solutions. Because when you're sitting down with a group of experienced players, sometimes like they've built up this well of these are the strategies that I know have worked well in the past. And they're not necessarily going to bring like that same creative energy and enthusiasm to it. So I love new players.
Amen.
We also don't know what to do. We're just like, all right. Like I remember they were like, okay, you need to roll that. I'm like, okay, which one is it? Like, you're giving me a handful of dice, and I'm like, okay, roll a 12. I've never rolled a 12. I've never seen a D12. Like, which one is it? And like, okay, just roll it. And I would like come up with those crazy ideas, and they're like, it's not going to work. And I roll a D20, it works. So
that is something fun. When I started teaching more people the game, and I was like, roll D20, roll a D6, and they were just like, what does that mean?
Like, oh, like don't forget to add your modifier. I'm like, which number is it? Like there are so many numbers. Like, oh, what's your AC? What is even an AC? Like it's just like how no. But like that friend afterwards like explained everything, and I was like, all right, now it makes sense.
I love this game, but let's not pretend the rule book isn't 2 phone books stapled together.
So that's
yeah, thing. I know it totally is.
When I'm teaching someone the game, I hold up the 600-page book. It's like, don't think of your character as this. You hold up the character sheet. It's like, this is your character. That's all you really need to know. And even then, most of this you won't even use. The other thing is that, so if I'm teaching a board game, I want to teach the entire game before we start the game. When I'm teaching a role-playing game, I just want to get into the game as soon as possible. And you teach as the dice are rolling.
Mm-hmm. Like I'm starting to do, we talked about this earlier, a D&D 5e game with some of my friends, but again, I've played like 3 times D&D, but like I'm a big researcher, so I need to know everything. So I'm just reading the playbook, the DM guide. I'm reading like the Volo guide to a like monster. I'm reading everything. I'm making them guides. And I'm like, okay, this is like, as start like this, and you just read as much as you want, but like don't read everything. Like if you read the like point by point description of like what a barbarian is, what a like ranger is, it's going to explain basic lines, and just read the one you're interested in. I'm doing this work so you can just like not read this 300 page of rules. Just have fun with it. Create your character, you know?
Literally nobody has the entire rulebook memorized. Not even the people who work on it is their jobs. So it's more a matter of like, you know, finding the pieces that are going to work well for you. And like, if you didn't get one rule right, like whatever, did you have fun?
Exactly.
And you succeeded.
I'll agree with you,
Perram.
but Mark,
he doesn't have the entire rulebook memorized either.
Oh.
This actually came up in for first edition when he was doing environmental rules.
Paizo PR, I don't know if that's Aaron or I'm trying not to say his other name.
Aaron's PR, yeah.
Okay. Is assuring us that the dice in the beginner box will be color coded.
Sorry.
Ooh.
So that would help.
So good.
Meagan.
Yes. Like it's okay. Just roll the red one. All right. Eventually, I'll recognize them. Now I'm getting a little bit better, but I'm still like kind of looking at it. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm counting. This is a D10. It's not a D12. We're fine. We're good. But yeah, color coded is actually going to help tons.
I am sure that the fact that many of us are fond of using like dice with arcane runes covering half of them, and it's impossible to tell what the number even is not helpful.
No. I like the ones that you can actually see from far away, like almost like black, like writings on it. I'm like, I do think that the arcane letterings and like little like motifs and whatnot are really cute. They're really cool, but like, I don't want to have to translate it. It's
yeah.
No, like what
There's a good I find for like when you're GMing and you don't necessarily want your players to be able to read your dice really fast, whatever you just roll.
Yeah, that's good actually. That's a nice.
Got a set of tiny amethyst dice that I use for that sometimes.
That's good. That's very good. Oh wow. Okay, I'm taking notes now because they're gonna want to look.
Linda, I like that in Pathfinder Society scenarios, there is a formula to the opening scene where you're meeting the quest giver, and it's like PFS scenarios will then go in very different directions after that, but that same scene is consistent. So you can talk about that and what Meg could expect the first time she would be sitting down for a PFS scenario.
Yeah, so whenever at the beginning of the Pathfinder Society scenario, all of the characters are gathered together and somebody is explaining to them what their mission is. And usually that's going to be a venture captain, which in game is a name for like a leader within the Pathfinder Society who can gather people together and send them on missions. And this venture captain will explain to the group sort of, hey, this is something that came up. We heard that these people over here were having an issue, or this new ancient ruin has just opened up and we can explore it, or any variety of other things that have happened. They'll kind of explain the basics of the mission that you absolutely need to know in order to do it. And then the characters have a chance to ask some follow-up questions if they want. And there's some information given to the game master there for how they might answer those questions. And then the characters have a chance to see what maybe they might know from their own background that's relevant to the adventure. So if an adventure takes place in Osirion, which is a desert nation that has a lot of ties in its lore to ancient Egypt, it's got like its whole pharaohs and pyramids and that kind of stuff, then your characters might have a chance to see, oh, how much do I know about Osirion? I can roll a check on this. So I can roll a d20 and add the right modifier to this to see what I know. So you'll start the mission with having a clear objective in mind. before, and then you have kind of a chance if your characters want to buy some more gear based on what they just heard, and then the adventure captain sends them off in the right direction toward their mission.
So they're kind of like for hire in a sense. So the adventures are built in like, okay, we need help. We're willing to ask you guys for help, and they send you on your way, essentially.
Yeah, so your characters are members of the Pathfinder Society, so they've already kind of passed all the tests to be these adventurers who get kind of these exclusive leads. So then their leaders, the adventure captains, are like, "Hey, you guys are here," and maybe it's that you guys are well suited to the mission, or maybe it's that you guys are the ones who happen to be here when this urgent thing goes terribly wrong. So I hope you're willing to help us out. But your group of characters is the group that's on the scene. And we usually don't say that it's like, this is the tailor-made group. Because the thing is that you could really have any party composition in a Pathfinder Society group. You might have a well-balanced group that's got, okay, yeah, you've got your heavy hitters, and you've got your defended characters, and you've got your characters with magic. Or, you might have a group where it's like, well, every single one of us is playing a wizard today, so this is going to be interesting. Or like you're doing this mission, it's like, well, I hope we've got some smart academic folks who are going to be good at documenting this information, and everybody's like, "I'm barbarian," and then the adventure captain's like, "Oh, okay."
Oh, read the Chronicle report in crayon.
Yeah,
Could I please
was a barbarian recruited to go to a wedding and hobnob to gain influence for the society, and it's just like, I am not suited for this role. I have no skills. I have no fancy clothes, and I'm just waiting for a fight to break out.
So we do try to make sure that each adventure has like different ways to approach it, so that if you do have that group that's maybe not the best suited, like they might not have the easiest time, but they're still going to have some creative way to make it through.
And can you keep like the same group with the same characters to do another adventure later on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
You can choose to organize and play with whoever you want to. So if you want to play with a consistent group, you can. If you want to play with like, so like my friends and I might go to conventions, and that's how I get started with Pathfinder Society, with a group of friends and family. And we would go and we'd play together with us, the four of us, and then a couple other folks who would rotate out based on whoever else was at our table.
Huh. So cool. You actually like meet up your group. Like you meet your group and you build it.
And if when we can do in-person gaming again, some places obviously that will happen sooner than others, you'll be able to go to a local game store, hopefully, that has a regular Pathfinder Society night. And I do know that when I was venture offering for my local game store, like, eventually all the players got to know each other and each other's characters, and they would muster up and say, "Oh, well, we don't have a cleric. Hey, Greg, do you mind playing your cleric on this one?" And like, all the players would get them, and to the point to where like during the games, the players in character would smack talk other characters who might be at the next table over.
Mm-hmm.
That's so much fun. The beauty of COVID, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's also fun to work together with other players to make characters have connections in their stories. So if you're like, I'm going to play your character's sister, or like our characters are best friends, or our characters are rivals, or this kind of thing. And then when you guys sit down at a table together, you can play off each other.
That's actually what I like the most about the gaming experience, is that like you can play, like you can riff off characters. Like you kind of forget, like, yes, that you're here with your friends or people you don't know, but like once the kind of like shyness falls with people you don't know, you just riff off with your character and you are someone totally different. Like the rogue in my campaign, my character hated her. She was awful. She was always dragging me into problems, and it's just like, it was exhausting. But the girl, I love her. She's a sweetheart. But like the characters don't have to like one another, and it's okay. That's something I learned playing Pathfinder. It's fine. It was very fun.
It's funny when like you're laughing hysterically at something another player does, and you're like, I'm laughing. My character's very angry at your character, but I'm laughing because that was amazing.
Yeah. I actually got caught in a rug at one point. I think it was a magic rug. Because like the rogue decided to go into like the tavern owner's room and like pick all the chests just to find scraps of gold somewhere. And like she knew there was a trap somewhere, but my character didn't. And I heard her like screaming or like yelping, and I ran in to help her. And it was just because she saw like a bug. So she yelped, but like I ran in and I ran on the rug and I just got caught. And I was like in kind of like a ball of rugs in the middle of the room. And I was like, you're so mean right now, but this is great. This is hilarious. This is awesome. But yeah, exactly like you said.
So this is a great time to mention the infamy system.
Oh yes, infamy. So the Pathfinder Society, while like the organization in the world sometimes has some less favorite characters they might work together with, when it comes to your characters that players bring in, they can be either good or neutral aligned. They can't be evil, because we don't really want to deal with like somebody coming in and being like, oh yeah, my character's so evil, he's gonna backstab you, ha ha ha, like that's not fun. So there's still the society, even if it does sometimes work with people who aren't like 100% squeaky clean, it does care about sort of how its agents are treating people and how they're presenting the society to the world. So there's a system called infamy, where if your characters do things that are really shady, then they might become infamous for their deeds, and then it's going to become a little harder for them to get resources and things like that until they put some effort into improving their reputation. So like in Starfinder Society is the example that pops to mind, which is very similar to Pathfinder Society, but it's for the Starfinder role-playing game. There's a point when the characters need to get past a retinal scanner. And if they decide to get past the retinal scanner by like taking out the eye of somebody after knocking them out and then using that to go past the retinal scanner, then that gets them infamy, because like that's a really shady way to get around that problem.
So suddenly cleverness is shady.
Well, you know, there's just certain things, like if you pass a certain line, and the GM always warns the table like, you're going to get infamy if you guys do that. So it's not like going to be a gotcha type situation, but just if the characters are sort of crossing a line there, it might be written directly into the adventure. It might just be like something that the characters come up with, and the GM's like, really guys, really, that's not cool.
I like that. It's just kind of, it makes it more real. Mm-hmm. Because obviously in real life, if you like knock someone out and steal their eyes,
I don't think you're knocking them out to get their eyes.
Unless you do it really hard.
You're a medical professional. I will have to take your professional opinion on that.
I actually said it and I was like, I hope no one calls me out on it. And you did. And yeah. Oh God. Okay. So let's say you kill someone and take out their eyes. Obviously, some people are gonna just change sidewalks when they see you in real life. So I think it's fair that in game they kind of do that too. You're gonna get a bad rap if you do that. Just, it's fine if you want to do it, but no, there's gonna be some consequences.
Or like in your rogue example, like somebody who's like, you're talking to this friendly shopkeep, and they decide, well, we're talking to this friendly shopkeep, I'm going to go in and steal their life savings. Like that would be the kind of thing that gets you infamy. Because then people are like, well, these Pathfinders came to help me, and then my life savings were gone. And like, that's not a good look.
That's not good. No, people are not going to hire you afterwards. Does it get it for the whole group or just your character?
Generally, it's like the people who took that action that was troublesome. So like if the rogue came after and was sneaking in, was like, I'm going to take their life savings later when you guys aren't around, then like that's not going to ding everybody else. It's whoever's making that conscious decision to let their character's reputation fall because they want their character to take the more morally questionable avenue.
Luckily, the paladin was looking over there.
You can
stuck in a robe.
You can earn your good graces back, but also on the flip side of that, eventually the society fires you.
Yeah, if you keep going on that.
That's fair.
It's not worth the insurance premiums.
So one question I often get from people that are new to Pathfinder Society is that if you could play with one group and then play with an entirely different table of people, how do you prove you're not like falsifying your information and bloating up what your characters have actually done? So Linda, can you talk a little bit about the paperwork and the paper trail?
Yeah. So after each Pathfinder Society scenario that you complete as a player, or if you're a GM, you'll be the one creating these. You'll get a piece of paper called a Chronicle Sheet, and the Chronicle Sheet is sort of like your proof that I played this, and here's what happened. So it's a little sheet that'll have a summary of the adventure that you just completed. And as well as a place for you to record the rewards that you got. So like the gold that you got and the experience points and maybe any other special rewards that you got for playing that adventure. Like you found these items, so now you can buy these items for your character. So with rewards, like you don't get like in a typical home game, if you find a super magic sword, like just the group has one copy of that super magic sword. But in order to make things like a little easier for games when you might just be playing with strangers, instead you get like a pile of gold, and then there's like a list of new shiny items that everybody can now buy with some of that gold.
Oh, that's cool. I also like that you can switch from characters, like what you said. Also, like you can switch character races and still keep your character, but you realize that you don't want to play like a gnome, to take the example you had earlier, and you can just like switch it to, I don't know, an elf, and then you have the exact same things that you had before, but you play the race you actually want to. You don't have to start all over again or kill off that character and rebuild it essentially the same, which is kind of redundant.
Mm-hmm. So that works for like the first few sessions, and like when you're getting into it. There's also like some boons that you can get that let you rebuild at a higher level. And you can also create new characters, as many as you want. There's nothing to stop you from building a giant stable of different characters. I know I have like 16 or 17 characters for first edition. Wow. And it's just like, oh, here you go. Well, because game masters get credit too that they can apply toward their characters. So if you GM a lot of games, then you'll also build up more of that credit.
As a forever GM, I have quite a few what we call GM babies. Characters that we wish we could play, and convention we sometimes get to.
In first edition, I had a GM baby that I took advantage of the rebuild rules because I made her a Slayer, which was it was an okay class, and I had an okay experience the first time. And then by the time I had leveled her up and was ready to play her a second time, a new book came out with new options that you could have a Slayer that's from the shadow plane and does all kinds of cool shadow attacks. And it's like, all right, this character's been through some things. We didn't see it happen, but somewhere behind the scenes, she went from just like, hey, I'm just your average happy-go-lucky Slayer to I'm a Shadow Slayer now, and I'm going to do shadowy things to you.
Shadowy things.
This is like Starfinder where everything has lasers.
Exactly.
One of the little rewards that you get after each adventure too is something called downtime, which is basically you're gonna have some time before your next adventure, and you can use that to like get some extra money or like retrain out some of the options on your character that maybe you decided you don't like anymore, even if they're a higher level character. So if you're like, I picked this feat, nah, I don't really like this feat actually, then you can switch it out.
And like Ryan says, like I love the retraining rules, and most of the time I use them, it's because some really cool book came out with a bunch of feats. The book we're about to review.
So let's talk about Pathfinder Society Guide right now, because let's say somebody comes in, they play their first game of Pathfinder Society. It's a good experience. They go over to the Pathfinder shelf and they see a book called Pathfinder Society Guide. Linda, is this the first book they should pick up after, say, the core rulebook?
I think that this is a really great option for players who are interested in the Pathfinder Society. It's not like strictly necessary to play, like you don't have to buy it, but it provides a lot more detail on what the Pathfinder Society is, what each of these factions are, what the history of the Pathfinder Society is, what is your life like as a Pathfinder, and it also provides information about sort of these Pathfinder Society lodges, which are big bases of operations, as well as a bunch of new character options and rules for a Pathfinder Society character.
Oh, that reminds me. So one thing we haven't gotten into is that as you play these scenarios, there's a couple of things that you will find recurring. Every season has a theme, and you'll see several NPCs show up again. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're part of factions that you are not a fan of. So can you talk about how just the mega campaign that is Pathfinder Society?
Yeah. So the Pathfinder Society campaign is, gosh, we're now going on what, like 13 total years or something, because it goes back to Pathfinder First Edition in terms of the story. Hmm?
First
3.5. There was a year.
Oh, yeah.
before Pathfinder.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Year zero was in 3.5. We did start that before. That's right. That's right. D&D 3.5. No, you're right. You're right. I wasn't quite as involved until year 2, but you're right. Because it goes back to a bit in D&D 3.5 and then through Pathfinder First Edition. So we have sort of this ongoing arc of stories that are told within the Pathfinder Society with these agents. And one of the things that the Lost Omens Pathfinder Society book has, sort of a recap of the highlights of what happened in all those past years, so that's basically what you need to know, and you don't need to go back and be familiar with that. When we started with the second edition Pathfinder Society campaign, one of the things we really wanted to make sure of is that people don't need to know like all this giant backlog of lore to get into things. And we really wanted to make this Lost Omens Pathfinder Society book a centralized resource of all of the major things that we expect that we're going to be pulling into, as well as a way to kind of expand upon things and drop in adventure hooks. So some of those adventure hooks are ones we're going to be picking up on in our stories, and some of them are, they're more for home GMs to pick up if they want to run a campaign centered around the Pathfinder Society.
Now,
I
also
love that the Pathfinder Society has a life of its own, because you think of it, it's not just the introduction for new players. It's also that, but there's a reason so many people stick around with it. And one of my favorite just power moves I ever did as a GM was I was running a quest giving scene with Sheila Hydebark, who is a character that we see often. And I was like, just a second. And I took out one of my Pathfinder comics and I was like, here's Sheila Hydebark. Here she is walking around. This is the manor you're in. This scene that's in the comic, that's you right now. And it was just so cool that it's just like Pathfinder is so interconnected like that.
That's surreal.
Yeah, you'll have some of these same characters show up in the long adventure paths and in like the Lost Omens books, like this one, and in all sorts of other places. And we work to make sure that they have sort of this consistent voice to them. One of the things that's cool about the developing story too is that in a lot of adventures we have like a few ways that we think the players might go. So maybe the players are going to attack this person or ally with them, or maybe they're going to choose this faction, or maybe they may or may not succeed to recover this relic. And we'll have like a little thing in the end for the game master to mark off, okay, what thing did they decide, or what did they achieve? And then we as the development team can go back and look at those later, and we often do, and see what did most people do. And whatever most tables did, that's the feature. So, like, if the players are given a choice to ally with this noble, or to ally with the rebellion against them, well, which one did they vote for? Which one did more tables do? That's what the Pathfinder Society did, and the future stories will show the ramifications of that.
I listened to you like explain this, and amidst that is so cool and that's awesome, I also hear that is such a huge load of work that you guys are doing. To actually like read through all of this, to be like, okay, we're going to build the campaign that way. You also need to build the campaign, but you also need to review everything, which is an immense amount of work. So kudos. Just wanted to like kind of like just throw it in there. Like, that's amazing. Congrats.
Well, thank you. It is several full-time jobs.
I'm consistently amazed at what the society, the organized play teams do, and how much work on the drop of a dime that the volunteers jump to.
Our volunteers, the volunteers for the society campaigns are amazing. They are so hardworking and great at recruiting new people, and they're the reason that I really got into society, is having that experience to connect with people at conventions and things like that. So, And it's really like one of the main reasons that I wanted to take this job in the first place, is because of how much of a great experience Pathfinder Society play was for me. Like I had a period in my life where I was really having trouble getting out of bed for much of anything other than going to play with my friends at the game store. And just being able to be part of that community was so helpful to me, that having a chance to work on this as my full-time job is really just amazing.
Now, there is one experience that Pathfinder Society can offer that you really can't get anywhere else. The mega specials. Please.
The interactives. So interactive specials. So usually, like if you're playing a table, you're sitting down, like, you know, other players at other tables, they might play that adventure they may play that adventure at the same time, but like they're playing kind of in their own version of the world. For the interactive specials, what we do is we tell stories where it really is, you know, maybe it really is tons of Pathfinders getting together. So at Gen Con, we might have upwards of 1,000 people who are all in the same room at the same time, and all of their characters are facing the same challenge. So there might be like, there is the city that they're in is under siege, and they're all going around fighting against the siege, or they are, or they need to go up into space and go into this asteroid and explore it, or they need to do any number of other huge challenges that take a lot of people to pull off. And so then what we do for those is that each time that a table succeeds at something, it earns points toward the entire house of people succeeding at that goal. So like once enough people defeat their monsters, then the monster siege is broken, and then you unlock this new area that you can go explore. So we do those giant mega events as well.
People play at those events, like roughly.
They are the things you go out of your way for. So they are generally held at larger conventions, and then over the years they're allowed to be held at smaller conventions. But just being in a room with 1,000 people, and you know, the table succeeds at something, everyone erupts, and then the GM's just like trying to get the person's attention that's running the whole thing to make sure that victory counts. And usually there's a giant interactive map on there, and it's like, this area is green, so everyone that rushed over there, that's safe now. You have accomplished the goal. We've still got 4 hours left, or 3 hours left, but that part is good. So now go to a different area, and now the GM goes to that area, and there's a whole different slew of encounters and different ways you're interacting with it. One of them I really enjoyed was where you're at the Grand Lodge, which is like the main headquarters for Pathfinder Society, and your main rival, the Aspis Consortium, it was Aspis.
Yeah.
They attack the Grand Lodge during this party with all these Pathfinders, and just like they're cursing areas of it. So like these statues are coming to life, and you have to fight these statues of famous Pathfinders and animal companions. Oh, it was wild. And then like the next day at the con, you could play as the Aspis that were sneaking in and doing a real mission while the main thing was going on. It was an unreal weekend of just being involved in this 1 4-hour in-world event. And now it's mentioned in the Pathfinder Society guide, and I just get to be like, I was there.
My first Pathfinder character died during Siege of Diamond City, and it was he died like on our table. It was an unfortunate circumstance where our table succeeded too quickly and too fast, so the challenges kept ramping up while we were waiting for the other tables to catch us up, and so we were starting to fight things that were not meant to fight. So the character basically stalled and basically intentionally got himself killed to hold off so that the rest of the party could get out. And at the end of the day, like everybody's like cheering, like literally 1,000 people playing in this game and cheering, and they've got like full sound effects and music and giant projectors throwing art and people in costume, and it's amazing experience. And the party started like, well, we're going to sell off some magic items and bring you back. And I'm like, no, that's probably the best way he could ever go out.
I feel like what you guys are describing is essentially, as a character, I would take place in the great like fight in Return of the King.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
That's essentially it. And I'm just like, yes, I'm getting nerdy butterflies. It's just like,
Well, it's also
So
the
we
literal
set them
season
up.
finale of the
Yeah.
that storyline.
Makes sense.
So we set them up so that characters can play them at a lot of different levels. So you can have like your brand newbies playing like level 1 characters playing in a version of the adventure that's appropriate for them. But you can also have like your 7th and 8th level characters playing in a version of that adventure that's appropriate for them. So they'll be sort of doing like, so the 7th and 8th might be fighting against the bigger challenges and the major bosses and things like that. But every Pathfinder has a role to play in the success of the group as a whole. Because like your high level people can't just fight everything.
You guys would be fighting a Nazgul and I'd be poking an orc with my dagger. That's kind of how I'd see it.
You're contributing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just
and
like,
you know what? Somebody that's fighting a Nazgul might just drop by and like, oh, here's bless for all you guys. Thanks for doing your part, and then run off to the next major threat.
In fact, the high level characters like the society has a level cap, but where because it just doesn't make sense to keep writing adventures for higher and higher play that can't be played in the session time limit, or at least this was true for first edition. And so the Seekers, which are like characters who have retired basically, or just like are above the level of normal adventures, they often get to come in for like very special missions during these huge mega games.
Yeah, because we don't have like a formal official level cap, but just from the logistical perspective of like we want to have more adventures for the lower level folks because there's not as much demand for the super high level ones. So as the campaign gets older, we'll continue to we'll have some higher and higher level stuff that's coming in. And I feel that second edition is a little easier to balance and account for than first edition. So there may not be quite so many concerns on that end for having super high level stuff, but we still got to work our way up there first. So we've got characters who can qualify to play it.
So Meg, we've taken you on a bit of a journey. We started with just explaining what Pathfinder Society is, and now we've gotten to the multi-table specials, which is just such a unique and wonderful and memorable experience that we get to do most years. So were there any questions along the way? Were there any areas that you want more information about?
Well, so far so good. Obviously, my brain is full. Like that's
sorry
understatement. No, that's fine. I'm kind of laughing too because it's just so much information, but all of it, I'm just like kind of giddy about it, for lack of a better word. I'm like, it's a cool thing to look up to. So obviously, the mega, I don't know how you call it again. The
multi-table specials.
There you go, that one. Like it's a cool thing to look up to, but it's not happening often, and the odds of being able to be there is a little bit more slim, but it's a cool thing to know that it exists and that you can like play on different sort of like to play it in the way that works best for you. Like you don't have to convince all your friends, kind of like Michael Scott trying to rope his friends into investing into candles in the office. Just like you don't have to talk about it over dinner all the time. You can like meet people online that are going to be like more than happy to play with you. And you actually get, that's the one thing that I love the most, is that every time I played Pathfinder or D&D, I always was kind of like roped in by one friend. But all the other people I met there, and they're great, and I love them. They're awesome. So it's a good way to meet new people. That's the way I see it too. So obviously it's a lot of information, but I think I got like the gist of it. And I got the fact that like it's very flexible to my way of living too. It's like when I want to do it, someone's going to be able to fit in there too without having to compromise necessarily. It's just a cool information to have. I didn't know all that was actually happening. So that's really cool.
So Linda, let's say Meg wanted to play a game right now. What does she do?
Okay, so I'm going to recommend this link again, pfschat.com, which is the link for the link for the Discord is going to be a great place for you to connect with people and to look for a game that's open. There are looking for game channels in there where you can say, "Hi, I'm a new player and I'm looking for a game," and folks will come over and help you find a game. If you'd like to build your character in advance, and then I'd recommend taking a look at just you can go through with the core rulebook and make yourself a character. And if you go to Paizo.com under organized play, in the Pathfinder under organized play, there is a link to something called the Guide to Organized Play. This is different from the Pathfinder Society guide. I'm sorry, this can be a little confusing. And this sort of has a quick start guide for like, hey, here's how you get started with the Pathfinder Society campaign. And it's just like there's a quick start guide that has those basic options, and it's got like more information about the campaign that's like way more than you need to know to play your first game, because it's got all the stuff. It's like, well, what if you're an organizer and you want to organize a thing at a convention? It's like, you don't need that.
Yeah, I don't need that.
But yeah, I definitely recommend connecting with the community because it's easier. Okay, well, maybe not. You mentioned that you're someone who likes to gather and read the information, so this might be a good way to go about it. A good way to go about it for you. But I do know that for a lot of folks, it's easier to connect with people who are actively playing and just get started in that game and start playing, and then those other details can come in later.
Makes sense, though. That's good. I actually looked up Kaiser and it showed me a barbecue website, so I think I'm somewhere.
Paizo.
Oh, thank you.
It's Greek for play.
There you go.
There we go.
It's on my shirt.
Is it? Wait.
Yeah, it was hidden under my hair. It was hidden under my hair.
I literally got to like a smoke meat website. So
that is a good point. Paizo. Because when you just say things like this is exactly why having a new player here helps, because otherwise you can just like say jargon and forget that you're saying jargon.
Well, apparently it's going to start their revolution to eating meat, so I learned something there too.
Wait.
There you go. Yeah. So Paizo is the name of the company that makes Pathfinder and Starfinder, and that's where I work.
Nice. I have both on my browser, actually, so I've got some homework to do
So
later.
Get some smoke meat, sit down, play Pathfinder Society game.
There you go. There you go.
Thing. Yeah, that's perfect. It's gonna become
a game and dinner for tomorrow or what have you.
There you go. I don't think it's gonna ship that fast, so.
No, probably not. Probably not.
Well, there we go. The race is on. Do you get your smoked meat first, or are you able to sit down and play a game first?
Ooh.
I bet you could play a game faster.
Yeah. Okay.
I bet you could too.
Yeah, that is a very active Discord, and people that are in Pathfinder Society, like Perram and I are into it, but there are people that are way more into it than us, and a lot of them are on that Discord, and they are more than happy to help you get into it.
That's nice. That's what I like about the community. They're just so happy to get someone new. It's never like, how long have you been here? It's, what do you want me to teach you? I'll give you the passion, you know? It's nice.
Well, any community that wants to see itself continue to exist 10 years from now. I mean, it lasted 13 years, and that's amazing for any game organization ever. But if you want to exist for another 13 years, you have to be friendly to the newbies, because that's the only way there are still people left to play with.
Mm-hmm.
So chat seems to want to know what the name of the website you went for the smoked meat was. They're really exploding with the smoked meat.
I mean, I'm going
to find it. Because I closed it to remove temptation. No, now I'm okay. I'm here.
Oh no!
I'm gonna be. No, I have it. It's just I feel really stupid.
Why?
It's Kaiser, not Paizo. So it's Kaiser.
Well, you know what? There's a bit of a language barrier, and we were just spouting it out as though it's a word you should know, which you have no business knowing, because this is one of your first experiences with Pathfinder.
But like, I think it's from another country too. So, yeah, it's great.
People can get their own smoked meat, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, it's nice though. It's polite. It's, hi, I'm Kaiser. Nice to meet you. I love smoking meat and veg. So.
That is not the same company, but it's polite.
Yeah.
So there you go.
They know how to reach out to Canadians. So there's that. It's okay. So if you want smoked meat with your Pathfinder, think of Kaiser.
All right. So we are going to be moving on to the review of the Lost Omens Pathfinder Society Guide. Meg, you're invited to stick around if you want to just listen to us nerd out some more and throw in any comments, or we can say goodbye and see if there's anything you wanted to shout out to. Your call.
I'm actually going to probably watch you on Twitch, because I think that actually people seeing my face of confusion and question marks is not going to be quite helpful. So I'm actually going to listen to you nerd out, but on Twitch.
All right. What's our Twitch address? Where can people find us?
If you want to participate in a live episode of No Direction, because yes, every episode of No Direction is filmed live in front of a Twitch audience, you can do so at twitch.tv/No Direction, or click the Twitch button over at NoDirectionPodcast.com, where you'll find the rest of our amazing content.
All right, Meg, before we say goodbye, is there anything you wanted to shout out to, bring people's attention to?
Not really. Mostly if you guys want to nerd out about D&D or Pathfinder, feel very welcome to reach out to me on Instagram. I always like talking to new people and creating new groups. It's always fun.
Do you want to remind people of your Instagram handle?
Yeah, it's Meg the Dweeb.
Can
So
we talk about dweeb for a second?
yeah,
Why dweeb?
honestly, just because I'm kind of an idiot. Just like so, right? No, but like I function very well in society and on my own. But like right before this podcast, I ran around my house and I knocked myself on one of the stairs and I cracked my nail.
Oh,
And I've been bleeding through this podcast. So like it's
ow!
like it's
Oh, well, thank you for your sacrifice.
it's
Please
fine.
go
but
take
it's-
care of yourself after
Again,
this.
aren't
I
you
see
a medical
why Lynn-
professional?
This is why Linda's wearing that crown.
Yeah, that's just her
Whoa.
fancy bandage.
Nice
pack in
not,
there.
my head is not injured.
No, it's just
I'm wearing this crown because it was because you guys put it in picked a preview picture of me wearing this, and it's so close to Halloween that I had to put on my Abigail Thrum crown.
I feel bad not wearing Mononoke now.
I should have let
But
you know
you
that
have-
we were doing a
yeah.
stealth Halloween theme.
Yeah. Stealth. Yeah, so dweeb is just because I'm kind of like, I nerd out about things a lot. In conventions, I ask my friends to jump on my back and I piggyback them around. It's
As
just, I always
dweebs
have
do.
snacks in my pockets. It's just kind of like, don't ask yourself how I
Do you think
why I
dweeb
do
means
things.
angel? Because this sounds wonderful.
Well, yeah, no, but I have no excuse. It's just, I'm kind of silly. It's, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you
Silly
very
is
much,
amazing.
Meg.
Silly makes for great gaming.
Thank
It's
you for
true.
joining us, Meg.
Thank you for
Look
having me.
forward to seeing you in the Twitch chat. Just chime in if you have any comments. And
Perfect.
we will be right
Thanks,
back
Tom.
with our review of Lost Omens Pathfinder. Oh, no, it's not a review. It's a breakdown because Linda's staying with us
Yes,
with our breakdown of Lost Omens Pathfinder Society guide right after this.
And we're back.
All right, now that we've gotten everybody caught up on what Pathfinder Society is, we get to catch everybody up on what the Pathfinder Society guide is. So, Linda, this is the latest hardcover from the Lost Omens line. What was your involvement in this product?
So I was involved in this product from the beginning in the sort of concepting and outlining phase to sort of make sure that it had a combination of character options and also an overview of what are the sort of important things for people to know about the Pathfinder Society. We wanted it to have a mix of information that is useful to players for them understanding their character's role as a Pathfinder, how they became a Pathfinder, what kind of priorities they might have, knowing about some of the main locations they might be going to, and also to have adventure hooks and things for GMs. I also wrote several of the sections in this book. I wrote the section on one of the factions, the Horizon Hunters,
Nice.
and I wrote the sections on the two of the big lodges, the Grand Lodge and the Woods Edge Lodge, as well as a few other like side auxiliary sections about extra lodges and extra NPCs and stuff like that.
You ready to dive in?
Yes, I am.
All right, before we even crack the spine, we have to talk about the cover. This cover is gorgeous. I love the Indiana Jones homage, which you were already talking about. It's very Indiana. Pathfinder Society is often compared to Indiana Jones, but then it's clearly very fantasy. She's got many tools and extra weapons on the back there. I love that she's using her magic weapon practically to light up the area. And we know that there is about to be an encounter because apparently she failed her perception check about all those ghouls. What do you see when you look at this cover?
I mean, I think this is really the classic sort of stereotypical Pathfinder who's like, oh yeah, I found this valuable artifact of great history, and just when you think that everything is fine, just when you're sent on a mission, it's like, oh, this is just going to be a simple mission. There's always going to be a twist. There's always going to be something that goes wrong. So then you've just got these ghouls that are coming in, and that's going to be the next challenge that she's going to need to face here. Hopefully this picture is just a little bit zoomed in, and she's got a team of fellow Pathfinders with her. She didn't decide to go off into that vault alone, because cooperating with the rest of your team is an important part of being a Pathfinder too.
Unless
Isn't
the
that
ghouls
the team
were
of
her
fellow
party.
Pathfinders behind her?
The ghouls?
Yeah, that's usually how groups end.
Well, I would hope that if her group all got turned into ghouls, that she wasn't just paying attention to that treasure, but Pathfinders also aren't always the most practical folks.
Speaking of the altar, so there's coins on the altar. There's a little golden cup with more coins in it, and we can clearly see like a visage of whatever the statue is, but I don't recognize it. Is this from Pathfinder lore?
I don't think that it is specifically. I think it's more of an imagined scene. But I do imagine that this altar here is probably hideously trapped.
So the ghouls are about to jump her, and then she gets skewered, and they're like, "Oh man!"
Well, it depends. Does she pick up the artifact before or after she notices the ambush coming in from behind?
Oh no, she's got her eyes on the prize. She is totally getting ambushed. Perram, any thoughts on the cover?
No, I just, like, the very first time I saw this cover, I was like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. And it really goes into showing us, like, the covers of the Lost Omens line, they've been taking a lot of chances and doing things so much differently than we're used to, and this is another fantastic example of that. Honestly, it's like, I like that the books for 2nd edition really look more like movie posters than they do the cover of your typical RPG.
I should mention that while this may not be like a specific scene, that NPC is a Pathfinder, a known Pathfinder, Karaya Asmarin from the Shattered Star Adventure Path.
Very cool.
So she might be seen around one of the lodges that's promoted in this book, the Hydemark Manor.
Maybe not anymore.
Maybe not anymore. Well, the cover leaves it up to your imagination just how skillful she is with that blade.
So how many callbacks and little bitty Easter eggs and references are there in this book? Because I could not keep track.
Oh my gosh. Well, this book really was, a labor of love by everyone who was involved in it. A lot of folks who are on the Pathfinder Society team or have been in the past were involved in this. And we really wanted to make sure that it pulled together both sort of the information that was in the previously published Pathfinder Society books, like the Pathfinder Society Field Guide. We went all the way back to Seekers of Secrets and the original Pathfinder Society book, and we saw some things in there that were a little like, that's not really actually the way the campaign went. So, and we also went through the entire record of scenario history whenever it was relevant to look at. Like, so if whoever's writing a section on a lodge, they're going to read every single scenario pretty much that takes place in that lodge and all the major stuff that we've said about it. Like, have we had encounters in that lodge? That's gonna go into it. And like, what have we said about this faction and all these different sources? That's gonna go into it. So I don't really know how I begin to quantify how many callbacks there were. Certainly a lot though.
I couldn't help but read this book a lot of the ways that I imagine a lot of people are going to read this book of, oh, I remember doing that.
All right.
Yeah.
I think we have to get into the first chapter because that's all the stuff that is in there. This is the legitimate history of Pathfinder Society as an in-world, faction, but it's also the development of the organized play. Like every chapter or every section where it goes into the history of it, it's not just like, oh, I remember hearing about that, or I've had play a character that played in something related to this. It's also I remember when that change happened to the organization. Like, I remember when these new factions were brought in, the new lodges. Like, like my mind was just blown reading it when it was just going in so many different directions because there's so much going on between the lines.
Yeah, we really wanted to make sure that we sort of condensed down to the highlights, those major changes that have happened in the society, both the ones that came about sort of from a more organizational perspective, like the faction switching up and things like that, and also those major events like that attack on the Grand Lodge from the Aspect Consortium that you mentioned before. That inspired a little section in the Grand Lodge entry that was about where I was thinking about, hey, the Grand Lodge really gets attacked a lot. They should respond to this. So now there's a thing that says specifically that they do drills to protect against the drills where they prepare for future potential Grand Lodge attacks, and they have all their new up and coming agents do these drills.
So I've said before that I've learned more about the campaign setting by playing in Pathfinder Society than in reading any of the campaign setting books. And I really felt that was reflected here because it is touching on so many events that I at least was passively familiar with because it was the scenario I played or it was referred to in a scenario I played. And so it was just like so contextualized, and it was so nice to finally read a campaign setting book where I felt like I was getting the campaign setting book setting as well as anybody else reading it.
I mean, the Society is where I think that it's one of the biggest reasons that Pathfinder as a setting feels like it's a living, breathing setting, even more so than the adventure paths themselves. Because a lot of the times with the adventure paths, it's so epic in scale and sort of like not everybody gets to play through all of them, but a lot of Pathfinder players can say they've played in one or two Pathfinder Society adventures, and over many, many storylines, the same characters probably played in like many of the big epic campaigns. And so really, I do believe that the Society is the lifeblood of the history of the game itself and the world itself. And this book sort of felt like it was the like best of compilation of all those events, even more so than it was as an introductory guide. This almost felt like it was an almanac or the Pathfinder Society yearbook.
Yeah, well, it was sort of the goal with it was for the experienced players to present like, hey, these are the major things that have happened, the major things that you guys have helped to shape, as well as to pull together those bits of Pathfinder history that were kind of scattered in a bunch of different places. But we also wanted to make sure that that when new players come in, that there's a collected place where they can find all of this information that's going to be, here's the highlight, so that they don't have to feel like they have to go back and play all these adventures to understand what's been going on.
And that goes all the way up into even the most recent season. This kind of includes some spoilers for Year of the Open Road in it.
Yeah, we actually we're working on this right up until syncing this with the interactive special at the interactive special at the end of year 2, beginning or the end of year 1, beginning of year 2, like the open road lodge and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that it was as current as possible at the time of publication.
Elfta Rose calling out the Razmiri Wayfinder.
Oh, we are
the
Razmir's surprising amount of presence in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So before I leave
that
chapter
new
1,
lodge is it? Oh, sorry. Yeah, that new lodge. We'll get to it when we get to that section, I'm sure.
Now, before we leave chapter 1, because chapter 1, it's pretty easy to summarize. It's mostly the history, but the sidebars are so much fun. It's got little important bits of history, like establishing where Pathfinder Society is as far as people in Golarion and how they view it, as well as what the meaning of the glyph of the open road is. But then we've got the hand signs, and we've got Pathfinder slang, and they were just a joy to read.
Yeah, the Pathfinder slang was one of the sections that actually we pulled John Compton in to write for this one. But it's fun to try to get a sense of what is it like to be a Pathfinder, and how might you talk, and what might your experience have been, and what are sort of these major events that you're going to be gossiping about among the lodge. How did you join the society? What was your training like? All that kind of stuff.
I like you have to know the campaign setting a certain amount to really appreciate some of the deep cuts in that slang. And I really feel like that's a good summary of this whole book. This is kind of like a reward for someone that is heavily invested in Pathfinder Society and in the campaign setting.
Yeah, I think that like the stuff that's the history really does, because we have to summarize so much. Like you're not going to be able to necessarily contextualize everything just looking at it. But a goal with some of the other stuff, like what is it like to join and things like that, is to be more approachable to sort of the new audience as well. But it's definitely true that we have so many things that we talk about and that we reference that like we can't. If we try to do everything, this book will be way longer than it is.
I do appreciate that at the end of the chapter 1, you've got the controversy, because a lot of this is really playing up how great Pathfinder Society is. It almost reads like a recruitment form that the Pathfinder Society itself might write. But then the controversy, it does show that, Pathfinder Society in the world has kind of a history of not always being the greatest. And it also shows that, in the 13 years or so that Pathfinder Society has been an organized play program, Paizo's learned. Paizo's seen some ways that they've represented Pathfinder Society as a group that were not meant to be as controversial, but we've grown as people and we've gained better perspective. And this is a nice summary of some of the ways that it's like it's not without its faults.
Yeah, and it still isn't an organization without its faults. Even though there's been several undercurrents of reform, and certainly, like you said, Paizo has learned and grown, and there's certain things that we presented back in scenarios 10 years ago that we wouldn't present now. But I think that it's really cool to show that growth.
Well, part of that ties into that ties back into my home groups and stuff. One of my groups was when we were starting to play it, we got to the point where they give the mission and then they make the usual joke and said, and let me guess, you're not going to give us anything to help us with this mission. I'm like, actually, no, you guys get to pick 2 magic items apiece from this table to take with you that's being provided by the society. And one of them says, what, we got a new union? And I'm actually, yeah, you kind of do. And this one's not led by an evil villain. Maybe, probably.
Yeah, so the new faction, the Envoys Alliance, that cares quite a bit about the treatment of Pathfinder agents, as well as the Pathfinder Society's public image and recruiting more allies throughout the world.
Chapter 2 is called Pathfinder Society Factions. Not sure if that's the greatest summary of all the content that's in here. It definitely goes into a lot of factions. Then it goes also into the different schools, the scrolls, the spells, and the swords. Is schools the proper term for that? What is the?
Yeah, schools is the proper term for that.
Yeah, we also get some information about the Separate. So it's factions, but it's factions and more.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like it's factions in sort of the broader sense of sub-organizations, but it's not just capital F factions as they are defined in the sense of the society. It's not just the organizations that members of the society themselves call factions. So it can be kind of confusing that way.
Yeah, we talked a lot about how Pathfinder Society means a lot of different things, but even the word faction, like Pathfinder Society appeared as a faction in the character guide, and now we've got a book dedicated to it, and we're learning about the factions within Pathfinder Society. So you just have to really know that there's multiple meanings to a lot of these terms, especially the umbrella terms.
There's some words that just get really tricky. It's like the word level. Like, how many different things does the word level mean, right?
6.
What are the 6?
I'm confused here.
Even and progressing. 2.
Yeah.
There's 2.
Yeah, but you got So when you look at those sorts of things, it's like it's at a level of a spell or a level of a feat or a level of whatever. So it is definitely one of those words that you sometimes you're sitting down with a thesaurus and thinking like, oh, is there something else we could call this? Like the word another one that happens is the space around relic and artifact that pretty much doesn't have any other words other than relic and artifact. It's like, what are you going to use to call this that doesn't already mean something else?
Bauble. Chotsky.
Bauble. Trinket. Valuable item. Treasure. Scrimshaw.
It's like the opposite of valuable.
I mean, a scrimshaw could be valuable.
Oh, Lava Being in chat is saying MacGuffin.
Yeah, yes, MacGuffin.
Unobtainium.
This is also where I started to notice all the sidebar characters. Could you give us a little bit of what's the deal with all of these sidebar characters? Some of which aren't called out in the text. It's just like, here's a person with a name.
Oh yeah. So if you're talking about like the factions, notable members of the factions, the idea was that the overviews would be more like general, and then the notable members were people that we added in to so that not only are these characters that we can pick up in organized play scenarios, but they're also characters to help home GMs flesh these out. And a fair number of these characters didn't exist until this book. So if you're wondering, where was this person from? The answer might be, they're new here. But it was because we also realized that we have a tendency to present factions as like, this is just the faction leader, and the faction leader is explaining things. And that's great for having few NPCs that you have to remember. But it's not necessarily the most realistic thing if it's always like this one person who's representing this faction, no matter where you are in the world, for literally every group. So we wanted to try to expand that out a little bit.
One of the areas that because my involvement in Pathfinder Society as a player and as GM fluctuates, and usually when I'm a little less, when I'm playing a little less often, the area that I get lost in is what the current factions are, what their goals are, who the important members are. So I do appreciate that part of this chapter of just like really cementing. It's like, these are the ones, this is what they stand for. And it's narrowed down to, there's really just 4 main factions at this point. We talk about the Radiant Oath and the Verdant Wheel in the beginning, because they're also there, but it really does simplify and clarify what the factions are and what they're all about.
Yeah, and the move down to having 4 primary factions was in part because when we had like 6 and 7 factions, just flat out fitting enough adventures to keep all of those active in their goals into a season is really tough. So we didn't have enough space to really focus in on things. And also the 4 factions let us center things more on the goals of what does it mean to be a Pathfinder. So when we were brainstorming these, even in the beginning, we have the explore the motto of the Pathfinder Society is explore, report, cooperate. So we've got the faction that's tied to explore, the Horizon Hunters, who like exploring and looking awesome doing it. The Grand Archive was the faction tied to report. They like chronicling the past and learning about history. The Envoys Alliance was, we mentioned before, sort of the Pathfinder Union and recruit people, the cooperate faction. And then there's the Vigilant Seal, which is sort of the faction of, you know what? We deal with a lot of really dangerous stuff sometimes, and somebody's got to be the folks who say, maybe we should like not poke the demon artifact. Maybe we should try to manage these situations. Who's going to be the ones who come in and help whenever you've got these dangerous monsters, these dangerous situations, other things like that are going on, and kind of make the calls of like, is this something that we can bring back and contain, or is this something we really just got to get rid of because it's going to be too dangerous? So those are sort of the four primary ideals that we got into in the beginning.
So I didn't realize that there was an Explorer faction, a Report faction, and a Cooperate faction until I started reading the Vigilant Seal, and it spells it out, which is funny because it's the one faction that doesn't fit into the 3, like 1 chapter per tenant.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did read that, I was like, oh, that is what the other factions are all about, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's not like we didn't know we were initially going into that. That was something that was just sort of a happy realization as we started to condense the ideas about what these factions would be. So like the Envoys Alliance faction wasn't even in our original faction brainstorm. But when we did when we put out a poll to the community about, okay, here's some faction ideas we have, and also you can write in if you like something. Envoys Alliance came out of that because there were a lot of people saying, we want another faction that looks out for Pathfinders and is recruiting people. So that came in because of fan feedback. And then later on, we realized, wait a minute, we've got Explore, Report, Cooperate right here.
Yeah, and honestly, even in my groups, the fact that the faction that was supposed to be looking out for us turned out to be the traitor faction kind of hurt.
Yeah. So we do not have plans to reveal that like Fola Baroon is secretly Grandmaster Torch or anything like that. Like, it's like let's just let the factions be what they're supposed to be, right?
So up until we get to the factions, we haven't had a lot of crunch in this book, and I appreciate that one of the first crunchy bits in it is the body recovery kit.
Well, it's good to have plans for that, right? Because Pathfinder missions can be pretty dangerous.
Oh, and I've definitely come across a fair amount of dead Pathfinders or been sent on a mission to be like, check on this Pathfinder we haven't heard from in a while. He's dead. He's always dead. I think every single time. Maybe there's some factions where they're just missing, but my experience is there's a lot of dead Pathfinders out there.
It's also possible that they've betrayed the society.
Oh,
yeah, that happens.
I think I've come across that too. Okay. And they're dead by the time I'm done with them.
Oh, there you go. So you were right. You were right all along. It was just like a few extra steps to get there.
In fact, finding dead Pathfinders was happening so often that I actually secretly thought that you all wrote one in every time somebody reported that they spent the prestige to get a rescue.
That would be funny.
Yeah, so one time in the early Pathfinder Society scenarios, there was a faction mission for every single faction. And one time we were playing in a game where the dead Pathfinder was related to one of the faction missions and nobody at the table was in that faction. So the GM just kept like hand waving, yeah, you see a dead body. It's a Pathfinder, whatever, move on. Because there was no like mission sensitive reward for us to investigate it. But we're like, he's dead Pathfinder. We can't just leave him here.
We can care about things even if we don't have a suspiciously detailed letter from a leader telling us to care about them.
Not when we're on that time limit and they're about to kick us out of the room.
Well, that's part of the intersection between the game and real life.
So
we're going to care really quickly.
Every faction gets a couple of pages of history. They get some notable members and a little a contextual quote or a contextual section there, and then a page of items. And I like that all the items are uncommon, but it specifically calls out that all Pathfinders get access to them. So it's not just Pathfinders in this faction. So right away, it's uncommon items, but if you're reading this book, odds are you have a character that could qualify to access these items.
Yeah. So for the Pathfinder Society campaign, it's as soon as you get 20 reputation with that faction, then you gain access to all that gear. And 20 reputation does not take very long. That's like 5 scenarios of being like, this is our faction. This is the faction that I like. So the idea there is like you kind of get your foot in the door with that faction, and as soon as they care about you at all, then they'll give you those items. But really, a lot of the items and options in this book are available to Pathfinder Society organized play characters right from the get-go. And we've updated the character options blog already to have all that information in it.
Yeah, actually, I realized I thought I'd misspoke, but so for the Envoys Alliance, it specifically says members of Envoys Alliance have access to the following equipment. But then the other ones, like the Grand Archive, all Pathfinder Society agents have access to the following tools.
Yeah, that is I should have fixed that in my review. But the sort of the intent was for them to be a little more focused on like people who are focused on this particular faction. But part of it though is that like faction membership isn't a super static thing. Like it was in first edition, where it's like, this is my faction, this is my one faction, I care about this faction, I'm earning things for this faction. It's more of a, hey, I'm a Pathfinder and I'm gonna try to build up my standing, my reputation with this particular faction, and by championing their cause in these missions that I'm doing. So yeah, it's more of a, when you say members of a faction, it doesn't quite necessarily jive in the same way that it did in the past.
All of the equipment is nice and flavorful to the faction that it's in that section of. I enjoy the stiletto pen in the Grand Archive. And there's a lot of the stuff in the Horizon Hunters is really basic equipment, and it's like amazing that this isn't in the core rulebook. An astrolabe, a ruler.
Well, the ruler's not uncommon.
Yeah, the ruler is a common item.
It's not uncommon. Well, actually, yeah, because when I was writing the Horizon Hunters section, I realized that I wanted a ruler to be as a part of the cartographer's kit, but there wasn't a ruler already.
Huh.
But I mean, it's like you can't fit everything in a core rulebook, right? So it was like, I'm just gonna make a ruler, and it doesn't need to be uncommon because it's like just literally a ruler. That's fine.
But I do like that you're only allowed to have a sturdy satchel if you're a member of the Pathfinders.
Well, but the thing about uncommon items is that GMs can make them in their home campaigns be available to groups. I like to think of it sort of as that the for these uncommon items, at least that they're not necessarily available everywhere in the world, but they are things that either they're things that people who were affiliated with the Horizon Hunters can find. So I'm not going to say that like the Horizon Hunters faction invented the concept of an astrolabe. Like, of course, the Horizon Hunters faction didn't invent the concept of an astrolabe in the world, but they are like a good way to get access to these options. And they're sort of people who are selling it or distributing them in the world.
In my headcanon, the Horizon Hunters came about because they were reading through old Pathfinder Chronicles and they were so sick of how crooked the maps were. And they were just like, you all need rulers.
Yes.
So
and low Calistro Benry on a drunken binge on her ship invented the concept of ruler. And that is why she gets to become a faction leader.
I mean,
go ahead, Brad.
Canonically, that's how the Verdant will come about, but it was just a lizard sneaking into the tower to do it.
Well, I mean, yeah, like Urwal decided that he was that he'd seen too many inaccuracies in past Pathfinder Chronicles, so he just sneaks in and is like, I'm gonna correct all of the errors in your documents, and I'm gonna fix the categorization that you have in this zoo and this menagerie over here. And people are like, what is that guy's deal? I mean, I guess he's helpful, so like, you want to be a field commission Pathfinder? Meh. And then he just like gathers a bunch of like-minded people and makes a faction. So I like Urwal as an NPC. He's a very unconventional leader for a nature faction.
I think he's becoming the Ziggy of Pathfinder Society.
Yeah, I can see that the eccentric, lovable NPC with an unusual manner of speaking.
So I feel like the faction gear took me on a journey because it started with the body recovery kit. We get stuff that's very, very appropriate, very not predictable, but logical. The astrolabe, the ruler. And then we get to the vigilant seal. And it's like, here's a grenade that's full of everything that anyone has an alignment is weak to. And you just throw it at them and see which one explodes.
Yeah, well, I think that it really helps to highlight the fact that, Vigilant Seal is that one that it's not the Explore, Report, or Cooperate faction. It's more of the, we gotta deal with the most dangerous stuff that's out there, so we better be ready for your planar incursions and all this other stuff. We gotta be ready to seal away this terrible curse, all that kind of thing.
Your psychic warding bracelet.
Yes.
I'm a member of my school's crisis management group, and reading through this just felt like the worst version of a crisis management. It's like, oh no. I know we planned for the worst, but do we really need demon repellent?
If you're a Pathfinder, you kind of do sometimes.
So something else about being if you're a Pathfinder, this book transforms one of the archetypes unimaginably. Well, yes, but one of them very specifically gets transformed like crazy in this book, and that is the Pathfinder agent dedication. It becomes the requirement for like a humongous amount of feats in this game. And no offense meant to the Pathfinder agent, but it was just like, someday I might come up with a character idea that might one time use this particular archetype, and like I can see how that would be kind of fun. To now I'm constantly thinking about, well, can I justify being a Pathfinder agent to get this really cool thing? Can I do it? Like, there's so many feats that just are added to this one single archetype all at once.
Yeah. Well, it was a goal to make the Pathfinder agent dedication be something that a lot of agents who are in the Pathfinder Society might want to take, regardless of their build.
Yeah, so just to go over the next 4 sections of this chapter, each have 2 pages of feats that are feats for a previously established Pathfinder Society themed archetype. So the first one, the Pathfinder Agent, and it gives you the reference there in the world guide. And then we get the scroll master from the character guide. The rest of them, I believe, are all from the character guide. The spell master.
Yeah, the spell master, scroll master, sword master. Yes. There's a theme to the way they're named.
As I was reading it, I was like, I should have been able to guess what the next two were.
Well, you know, it makes it a little easier to remember once you know that's the pattern, but like it wasn't guaranteed that they'd be named that way.
So this was actually the section I was not super hot on. I did find a lot of these felt like general feats. Like, I don't know how many of these feats I would take the archetype to later gain access to. But there were definitely a couple of them, especially in the swords, where I was like, I just wish I could sleep in armor, but I do not want to take the Swordmaster just to get access to Armored Rest at 10th level.
Yeah, so like ones that you'd rather have on more broad access?
Exactly, yeah. There was a lot of opportunity cost to these being archetype feats for a very specific archetype that we've seen previously. There were actually, even though I said that the Armored Rest was the one that I specifically said I wish this was a general feat, because really, any character I have in armor, I would just like to take this just to not be inconvenienced about what I'm doing with my armor every time I go to sleep. But of the four, I think the Swordmaster might have been the one I liked the most. Let me just double check my notes. But Perram, you were saying that it transformed the Pathfinder agent archetype. So what were your thoughts overall on these sections?
I mean, mostly positive, because these archetypes, I'm honestly, I felt like these archetypes at the time were like super niche. Like, there's like a very specific character that would take this just so that they could be part of that background, like where the background was justifying the character choice more so than the character choice encouraging you to go down the background, if that sort of rules make sense. And these sections kind of flips that math, where like now this ability is so cool, maybe I will play a scroll master, maybe I will play a sword master and work it in to get the access to this ability. And then some of them were like, that really, like, I could tell that somebody else really needed that one. Like, I mean, mobile magic combat just like reads like every skish in the game needs that feat so badly, and it's like, oh well, now everybody's joining the society.
Yeah, my notes on that were specifically mobile magic combat is the low level feat every magus would want. Too bad it's a high level archetype feat.
And I think that one of the options that we certainly have is if there are certain options that are really popular that people are like, hey, I want to have this. Just like how you have even some of the base classes that share their feats, that some of these things might be able to come back in other forms as well.
And we're going to talk about that when we get to Chapter 4, Pathfinder Society options. So looking over my notes, the Scroll Master was actually the one of my favorite. I liked the Bestiary Scholar. I liked the Masterful Obfuscation. So Scroll Master, just more that it's a lore-based character. I could see myself even being like a fighter or a barbarian who also takes some Scroll Master archetype and just shows that, he's a bit of a brute, but he's also got a bit of a brain.
I do like the new art of Creighton Shane, with his sort of like distracted look and those giant sunflowers, reading a book with a bunch of eyes on the cover. That's just Creighton Shane.
Yeah, I didn't notice the eyes until like I was done studying the picture, and then went, ugh, and I believe that is exactly what you wanted.
Yeah.
Well, if we're talking about art, can we go to page 51, Marcus Farabellis? That looks like the cover of a comic about Marcus Farabellis, written by Marcus Farabellis.
It totally does, doesn't it? Like Marcus Farabellis' glamour shot.
He's got an impractical amount of gear, and he is so proud of it. Like, he's got 3 swords, each bigger than the last.
Well, I guess it's a living illustration of what your PC looks like when they're a high strength PC who is pushing the limits of their bulk.
Yeah, I mean, he is or was a master of swords, so it's justified. But I love it's bombastic and over the top, but it legitimately is one of my favorite pieces of art in the book.
He's a friendly guy, and it's good to be able to show that he doesn't take himself too seriously, but he's also got some pride of his own.
Then we've switched from crunch mode, which is this thing, and we go right back into history mode with the next chapter, which is
Forbidden History.
Oh, goodness.
Mhm.
This is my favorite of the big splashes because I like those. This is what life is probably like in this moment thing because they help me as a GM to help it describe things and flesh it out. And this particular one, it is my favorite for that reason. If there are no other reason, then you've got like all these people studying, this one dude reading the scroll backwards probably, and then just like the dog. And I'm not entirely sure that the dog isn't a member of the society.
Anything's possible.
Sorry, Perram, I got distracted. What are you referring to?
The chapter 3 splash cover.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought we were going to talk about the Decemvirate for a second there.
Oh, my bad. We're skipping ahead.
So yeah, this chapter ends with the Decemvirate, and honestly, I was surprised this information was in there. I thought this was the kind of thing that you really only earned from years of Pathfinder Society play and playing in the high-level adventures.
Yeah. So it was an interesting decision here with that. It was like, what of this information are we going to pull forward? And we decided to pull forward the stuff that happened in the December related stuff that happened in the first edition, so that we'd be able to reset that up to the current point in the campaign. In part because we really did need to be sure that that Eliza Petrolangro is a character that we could use in her new current role.
So we have some questions in chat about some of the other pieces of art. Specifically, we've got an agent in a wheelchair in the first chapter, and later we've got the swordmaster with the amputated arm. And I especially appreciate that the arm is not bandaged at the amputation point, because anyone that I know that has an amputation, they do not cover it in the same way that you will usually see them covered in fiction, because it's a healed over wound. It's not something that has a risk of infection, and the bandage is really just to cover it up for other people's benefit. So I appreciate that this is just on full display and even in at the foreground of the picture. So Lava Being is asking if these are specific characters and if they've been identified as members of canon.
These two I don't believe are specific characters yet, but one of the nice things about these art pieces is that it's very easy to then pull them in and be like, when we use this character, hey, we've already got an art for this. So the ones who are specific characters generally are the ones who have a specific name attached to them, and those are ones that we've used in the past.
All right, so Perram, you had moved on to Chapter 3, Pathfinder Society Lodges. And you know what? I've talked a lot. Why don't you take over?
Okay, so this is where a lot of these lodges, Okay, so this is where they start to list a bunch of specific lodges. First, it talks about the generals of what a Pathfinder Lodge is and how it's organized, and why they exist and what you can expect to see there. And then it just starts talking about very specific lodges, and I like that this is one of the other sections where it really feels like we're calling back to the history of these adventures that you've GM'd and played through a lot. Like right off the bat, we've got Janira Gaddix, which is a character that I've GM'd as a dozen times now. She keeps appearing again and again and again. She's been in the newbie adventure twice, and even in second edition's beginning adventure, she has a little cameo section. So you start right off the bat with the familiar faces, and we get these nice illustrations of what the lodge actually looks like, which is the first time we'll actually have seen these places that we, as characters and GMs, technically have been to more than any other places in Golarion.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun to see those, and also to see the heraldry for each lodge. What do these lodges use as their symbols? We realized in working on this book that this was a chance to also answer some of those questions about the society that we just didn't have answers to, and didn't realize we didn't have answers to until we started exploring these things. Like, who are the direct enemies that this lodge most often has to deal with? What does this lodge what kind of services can you find at this lodge? How does this lodge function on a day-to-day basis? That kind of thing.
You mentioned we've got art for Hydemarch Manor, which is, in a lot of the history there, is again stuff we've dealt with both in Adventure Paths and in Adventures. And now we've got art for Canyon Hydemarch, which we haven't had before, or at least not that I've ever noticed.
Yeah, I think he showed up in Shattered Star, but it was an older picture. We didn't have, for a lot of these characters, we had an older portrait, but we didn't have a full body art to really showcase them. So it's great to have that chance to really illustrate these people out in a lot more detail. You'll be seeing a lot of these pieces in upcoming Pathfinder Society scenarios for sure.
Ooh. Now, Perram, you skipped right to Hydemark Manor. You are skipping over one of the
right,
standout lodges, and that would be the Exalted Lodge in Razmaran.
Yes.
Approved, like it's the only place in Razmir, the only place in Razmaran where you are allowed to worship a god other than Razmir, but that is specifically within the walls. Like, I love the really tenuous relationship between the Razmiran cult and the Pathfinder Society that this lodge represents. I love that Razmir's face is on at least 3 different parts of it just from this angle alone.
You better not forget who's letting you live here.
It's only the outside facing faces. Look at the door. It has an inside. It's a wayfinder instead.
Yeah.
No, really. All hell Razmir. Really. We mean it. Wink.
Wink. Yep. Well, you know, the leader of the lodge does mean it, right? Venture Captain Narson.
Mace Narson.
Narson. Well, because with this lodge, definitely, like, we wanted to. We were talking about before how the society cleaned up its act in a lot of ways, but we also wanted to make sure that it wasn't becoming kind of too goody two shoes for a lot of different character options. So this lodge came about in sort of a sense of like, how can we do like an interesting venture captain who isn't necessarily the most goody two shoes person, right? An interesting place where you're not really necessarily sure fully what's going on with this location, but it's a valuable place to explore nonetheless, even if it may have its challenges. And even if it may have sort of that sense of like, what else is going on here with this lodge? Why are we allowed to be here all of a sudden?
And this is also another point where I was surprised, because this is tying into an extremely recent Pathfinder Society adventure, Lodge of the Living God, which I know intimately because I guest starred playing through this for Roll for Combat's Tales from the Black Lodge podcast. So after you play through it, or if you don't have the opportunity to play through it, you can check out there. And it's a very good adventure that I appreciate a lot. And then so it just was a bit of a shock to the system. Something that recent being in this book and spelled out and having an effect on the world. I was like, huh? What? How's this already in here? Isn't there like a lag delay between China and what I play?
Well, yeah, I mean, there is a lag delay, but we also knew on our team, like, we would know like what was going to be upcoming in scenarios, so we could work on things in both directions, right? So when cases where the book had to be solidified first, we'd then make notes so that when the scenario was solidified after, the scenario would match the book and vice versa. But there was definitely some coordination involved there, yeah, to make sure that those details all lined up.
So I talked a little bit about how I really appreciated seeing things that I was familiar with, but I also really appreciate seeing things that I'm not familiar with and just wanting to find out what adventure that is. And one of the examples there is the Open Road Lodge and meeting Morgurk. That giant rabbit riding goblin with like just the bluest of eyes. I want to know more about him. I want to find the scenario that he's in. I want to play it. I want to GM it.
And for some things like that, the Open Road Lodge is new enough that the answer is none yet.
Oh, really?
But,
okay. I kind of assumed that everything at least was established in
the Open Road Lodge is if you read the section, the Open Road Lodge is brand new. It was formed in 4720 AR, which means that it is based on scenarios from 2020.
Mm-hmm. This is 2020.
Yep.
It's 2020 right now.
Yeah. No, this is based on some events that happened at Gen Con. So this was definitely one of the ones that was more of a make sure that what's in the book then matches what's in the scenario when it comes out.
Yeah, and that does lead into this like really amorphous, like, how do I recommend this to people? Like, when do I recommend they read this content? Like, how much spoiler is it? So that is one of the few things that, like, that I have to consider when I'm talking about this book and who should read it. It's like, it's really great content. It's good for this. And if you're a GM in society, yeah, this is fantastic. But also, like, there's like a group of people I'm like, don't read this yet.
Yeah. Well, this isn't going to include any spoilers for things past sort of the August range, right? Of scenarios. It is set at that time period, that cutoff of right around. Actually, the book's publication is it's current to book's publication. So any scenarios and adventures that are after that are not going to be spoiled by this. I think that it can be a good idea for people who are like really sensitive to spoilers to play through some adventures that they want to in year one, and potentially that interactive special 200 first if they don't want to have any spoilers. But we figured that we wanted to. That was definitely like a decision. It's like we wanted to make sure that we had the strongest starting point that we could. But it does mean having some spoilers in there. So that would be my.
It would be really difficult to not do a lot of spoilers, because a lot of what's happened in year one of Pathfinder Society Volume 2. I'm really not sure.
Second edition Pathfinder Society.
Second edition Pathfinder Society, right. Yeah.
A lot of what happens there is foundational. Like it's people playing through major changes that are basically setting the field for what is to come. And this book would be very difficult, or would lose a lot of its value not taking it into account. So it's sort of like a really difficult balance beam to walk.
Yeah. It definitely was challenging there.
I don't feel like the spoilers are really well spelled out. And if you're not familiar with the Pathfinder Society scenarios, I don't think you'd realize a lot of these are even spoilers. You just think it's more and more lore. And maybe after the fact, when you go back, play the scenario, and maybe read the book again, you're like, oh, that's a thing that I already knew about. But it's just such a different experience that I don't think it's going to just spoil too many scenarios.
Yeah, and I think that we did try to, when we were saying things, like not necessarily explain exactly how things came about, so that even if you know, like, okay, I know this is going to become a lodge, you don't necessarily know, like, how did it become a lodge? What were the steps that led up to it?
And Pathfinder players are kind of used to this, because like we used to make a joke that during any Gen Con that like all Pathfinders are time travelers. It's like you're going back in time to people that are dead and taking missions from them. And...
Oh yeah, totally. Or like you play scenarios out of order, and then it's like you talk about how this person is dead, or like this person's in charge of this lodge over here, and then you go back to when a previous person was in charge, and you just kind of gloss over it.
My favorite was playing a Shadow Lodge faction character in the Year of the Shadow Lodge.
Yeah, that would be a good one.
You had a worse time than I mean, I've played Lantern Lodge ex-Lantern Lodge characters during Lantern Lodge adventures. They had a better outlook on things than you all had. Oh, mission successful? Awesome! No.
What are you doing, What are you doing, rest of the Shadow Lodge? This isn't how things are done.
Wanted to go back, like whenever I had anything, especially immediately in the aftermath of what happened with the Shadow Lodge, and playing back to adventures where Grandmaster Torch appeared, and they were like, we stab him a bunch. Wither King actually has a really important question, I think, right now. They ask, so Pathfinder Society influences the campaigns?
The Pathfinder Society, do you mean like what decisions players make in the game influence how the campaign shapes, or?
I think they're more as I think we need to have the answer to that question, because it's a cool answer. But I think they mean like the canon. Like, does what happened in Pathfinder Society affect the canon of other published Pathfinder material?
Yes, it does. And with the Lost Omens Pathfinder Society guide, we have brought that current so that it's easier also for other folks to reference. But definitely when we have these things that are touching upon characters and themes in the Pathfinder Society, like other developers will come talk to us and they'll be like, hey, what's the deal with this thing? And then we can be like, this scenario and this scenario, or where we've done this before. So yeah, we do look to do that. There's sort of a sense of when does the campaign snap to the storyline snap to current, right? Because like with the with the Pathfinder Society and the things that are around that, then we'd be continually showing, year over year, the progress that happens. But with Adventure Pass, for example, a lot of those sort of existed in a limbo until we switched over to second edition and they snap forward. But generally we do try to, when we have established that something has happened, keep it current in the products that we produce.
And a solid example that some of our listeners might be familiar with that Rex the Liquid is referencing is that War for the Crown was influenced heavily by PFS. And we even, during one of our first actual play podcasts for No Direction was Adventurous, where we are playing through War for the Crown under Crystal Fraser, who developed that adventure. And when one time when she couldn't make it, I ran us through one of the Pathfinder Society adventures that like literally happens in the same room that the adventure starts in for the adventure path. Like it's like it all happens right here. You kick in the door and then you'll see your characters do something over there.
Those crossovers are always fun to have. We have another example of that is the Pathfinder Society scenario Reaver's Roar, which came about because Ron Lundeen walked over to the organized play cubes and said that he had an encounter that was going on in Tyrant's Grasp. And for everything there to work out, he needed a monster that had been established to be in this particular area to not be there anymore, and asked if we could have the Pathfinder Society be sort of the reason on screen why the canon moves forward, so that he can then have things be different when the adventure path comes about.
That is amazing.
I love it. Oh yeah, and let's answer the other question. The other version of that question: does what the players do in Pathfinder Society affect the canon of Pathfinder Society?
Yeah. So I did mention this a little bit in the earlier part, but we do have the reporting conditions at the end of scenarios, and whenever we go back to areas where they're in scenarios where there've been big decisions, then we will review that data and see like who did the PCs ally with, or what did they achieve, what did they accomplish, and then that's the answer going forward for the canonical result of the scenario. And we'll always this is why, like, for some of these more consequential decisions, you'll see us waiting like a year or sometimes even a little bit more to follow up, so that we have plenty of time to gather data and make sure that people have a chance to get their vote in.
Now, I'm not sure you can even answer this next question, but what might potentially be a very extreme example of that exactly taking place is talked about in the Decemvirate chapter, where it mentions a group of seekers that helps out an unmasked Decemvirate member, and that it's rumored one of them may have become the next replacement member of the Decemvirate.
Mm-hmm.
Could that potentially be an theoretical example of an extreme way that player behavior influences the canon of the world?
That could potentially be an extreme example of the way that player behavior influences the canon of the world. Yes. That is a reference to that is a reference to something that might happen in one of the scenarios.
Excellent. I mean, it's not like you haven't had an organized play campaign that is other organized play campaign that happens in the far future of Pathfinder that is currently being led by one of its players.
Yes, exactly. That one was awesome, where players submitted characters who were then able to who are then and then that was from them was selected the candidates that players then voted on to say who was going to.
Because voting is very important. Remember that. Voting affects your Pathfinder characters.
In real life as well, it's very important.
Oh, yeah.
On that note, we're going to wrap things up with Chapter 4. Pathfinder Society options.
Oh.
So it opens up with more gear, and I just was like, boy, there's been a lot of gear in this book. That's the majority of the equipment, or sorry, the majority of the options. But this is more good gear. Like, all throughout the book, every lodge had one or two pieces of gear. The different factions had their own gear, and now we've just got a general gear section. Mm-hmm. And it's good. There's a lot of just useful basic items, and then when it gets to the magic items, I really like a lot of these magic items. The Spectacles of Understanding are glasses that let you comprehend languages, which is huge, because learning languages is a lot harder in second edition.
The familiar satchel! The familiar satchel! It's so useful!
It's so cute!
Yeah, it's also so cute.
And we'll just jump ahead then to, we've also got the new familiars, which are all magical and weird and wonderful. The puppet.
The puppet.
Look on the puppet's face. Like that's not a member of any party.
Oh yeah, the puppet there is totally going to kick some butt if you don't take her seriously, or even if you do, she's totally going to kick some butt. I love the braids too, the tiny little braids and the straight across bangs.
And they're chatting. Rexel Quit is like Dwemer kitten! Exclamation point. Yeah, I imagine a lot of Dwemer kittens are about to be put on characters.
I imagine so too. Yeah, these familiars are super fun, and these are another example of things that could only exist. Things that were like Paizo folks sort of took advantage of the fact that we knew what other stuff was coming out to put stuff in. So like Mark Seifter wrote these familiars, and so he was able to put them in using the specific familiar rules for the advanced player's guide, which had not even like made it over to editing at that point when he was initially writing it. So it was like, hey, we can put these things in and we can make these connections.
We skipped over one of the sections that I really appreciated, and that was the Academy Instructors. I like this for a lot of reasons. It's class feats with multiple class traits. And so I do like that it says that you lose the trait that is not related to your class if you do take it. But I do like the flexibility there that multiple classes, if it fits in their niche, then they qualify for it. And I also like that they're named after characters that we have encountered or know. And the powers that are granted by these class feats relate back to those characters. Like there's just so much to each individual feat. Crichton's Cognitive Crossover is a fun one. Let's see. Let me just double check which one I called out as my favorite. I just said I like them all. Okay.
One of the fun things here was with the Reign of Embers stance. You'll notice the very first feat in that is rare. And that's because that's something that people can get as a reward from a scenario, which then once you have that, then you can get the rest of the chain. Or if you're doing it like as a home GM, then you can have another quest or adventure for them to unlock that.
Yeah, it does call out that Pathfinders have access to all the uncommon options in this chapter. I believe this might be the only rare option in the whole book.
I think it is, and that's to preserve that. That's to preserve that chronicle.
A lot of these are also just straight up common, but then some of them also, and a few of them are. This is another reason I said that the agent got a lot of bumps, because some of these are like they're common, but you gotta be an agent.
Yeah, well, because you don't need to list sort of the commonality traits if it's under something that's already uncommon or
what
stuff
I meant
like that.
is I like it because it's like even more buffs to Pathfinder agent, which now we have this Uber archetype, and then also it's brother and sister archetypes that are also Ubered because of this book.
I want to call out one of the general feats of this section, Fane's Escape. It is so specific, but it is so wonderful. One of the requirements is you have a deck of playing cards in your possession, and what you do is you create cover of just throw deck cards in the air. They float down, allowing you to make a sneak attempt to escape.
And you'll
I
have
saw
those
some
cards.
comments on the forums that were like, every rogue now is going to be buying a deck of cards.
You got to buy 10 decks of cards if you want to make use of this feat. Or one trip to Vegas where just every casino is giving you a deck of cards while you're there. So you get a big stack of them.
Hey, yeah, there you go. There you go.
Well, luckily, you can, if you have Fane's Forbury, which is a requirement to... No, it's not a requirement.
Nope. Yeah. Two separate Fane options.
I thought for sure that would be. Well, anyway, get Fane's Forbury so that you can enchant that deck of playing cards and get it returning.
Mm-hmm. Just defeat all your enemies with playing cards. And then run away.
Right.
And attack them from the shadows that you've created with your playing cards.
Winter King in chat is saying, can you win rewards from older society games?
Are you talking about this isn't connected to any of the first edition scenarios.
Oh,
or are you talking about something else?
I think when you were talking about Reign of Embers being Reign
Oh,
of Embers
yeah.
stance being
Oh,
red.
yes. That's a reward specifically from that's a reward specifically from one of the second edition adventures.
All right, that brings us to the glossary, which I know Luis always wants us to comment on, and by the time I'm done reading the book, because we've got to really pour through these to make sure that we have them done in time.
Comment on
I don't
the
have time to
glossary.
go. Sorry, what was that, Perram?
I do have a comment on this glossary because it's a little odd.
Oh,
I mean, I appreciate it, but this. Usually, I'm used to the gloss decks mostly consisting of items that are inside the book, but most of the listings in this gloss decks are references to pages in other books.
You're right.
Yeah, and I thought, like, this is strange, incredibly useful, but not at all what I expected at all. It's an incredibly useful resource, but like, I just came out of nowhere, just because I'm not used to seeing it. But like, it is like, hey, it's basically a giant list of, we threw all these proper nouns at you that if if you're new to the game, you probably don't know anything about. But if you would like to, it was written in this random book over here, this page number.
Yeah, because there wouldn't have been space to find all of these out fully. So I think that this is useful too for players who are looking for more information on these topics to help build their characters.
So that does it for our breakdown of Lost Omens Pathfinder Society Guide. As far as I'm concerned, it's another win for the Lost Omens line. It is a valuable campaign setting tool. It is completely invaluable if you are a Pathfinder Society player. And it's just a special treat if you are a longtime Society player.
And there's one thing I kind of want to go back to just really stress is that, yes, super useful if you're a Pathfinder Society player. This is almost a must buy. Like, if you are invested in Society, you really need this book if you can afford to get it. It is incredibly valuable. If you're a longtime player, it's going to be a fantastic nostalgia trip. If you're an active player, there's so much resources to take advantage of. But also, something we mentioned in the first half of the episode is that if you're playing any game in Golarion, the Pathfinder Society is one of the largest, most influential organizations in this setting. And it might be useful as a GM in that setting for any adventure to know a little bit about one of the most prominent players in it. And it's real easy if you're just paying attention to adventure paths or just reading other books to just like think that the Society only exists in organized play, when really it is this massive influential force that is changing how the world goes.
The Pathfinder Society is a good foundation for home campaigns as well, because it's a really easy way to tell stories where you have a group of characters who might shift around a little bit over time and who can go all over the world and participate in all kinds of adventures.
I also think,
or they might have a more specific adventure that they're doing, like in the Shattered Star adventure path, which was a group of Pathfinder Society agents.
And just having the lodges, the illustrations of some of the most popular lodges, like that I see being the chapter that I reference the most when I'm running the game, and one of the reasons that I'll always want to have this book on hand when I'm running PFS.
I'm gonna go home, make some tarot cards with all the pictures on one side and the lodge captains on the back, just so that I can keep them in my bag of Society.
Oh, that would be useful, yeah.
All right, we are ready to wrap things up. Linda, why don't you stay with us for the wrap-up section so you can also give any shout-outs you might have.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll be right back to wrap things up right after this.
Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups. Wrap-ups and shout-outs.
And
thank you for joining us for episode 235 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. Before we go, we want to shout out to a couple things that are of interest to us, and we believe that as fellow fans of Pathfinder and people that are fans of our podcast might like to check out. So, Linda, before you go, what are some of the things that you would like to bring attention to?
Well, I would like to shout out to the Twitch stream that I'm on, Arcane Mark, which you can find at twitch.tv/arcanemark. I stream there along with Paizo design manager Mark Seifter every Saturday morning and Thursday evening. So please come join us. We primarily talk about Pathfinder. We build items. We tell stories of our campaigns. We give advice for GMing and playing the game, and we hang out with folks. So
How long has Arcane Mark
you're
been
welcome
going
to
on?
join us. We've been going for about 18 months now. I think we started in March or April of last year.
It feels like you've been doing it for years. Arcane Mark is something that I'm often seeing on social media. It gets referenced a lot because YouTube just put out so much content. It's fun, it's valuable, it's useful, and informative.
It's really fun, and I really enjoy our community as well. We have a Discord as well, tiny.cc/arcanemark, and everybody's welcome to come join us there.
Perram, do you have anything you want to shout out to?
Just shouting out to, it's kind of a shout out, kind of like a stealth news item. Remember those really awesome character sheets from Beatles and Grimm we talked about during PaizoCon?
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah, well, evidently that Kickstarter for those is going live on the 27th, and they've got a bunch of preview material on the Paizo blog right now that is worth checking out. And I'm sitting here going, how do I budget that?
So keep in mind, you don't have to buy them all right now, Perram. As soon as it funds, then you can get a couple of them now, and the rest of them will be eventually available in stores.
Kickstarter exclusive edition.
There you go. That's what you got to pay attention to. So Zathos of Arisia is asking what Kickstarter. Can you just sum up what the Beatles and Grimm Pathfinder character sheets are?
Okay, so Beatles and Grimm is this like company that does like these really bespoke, high-end, like really premium items for different role-playing game items, and they're doing these complete character chronicles, which are these like little mini books of character sheets for Pathfinder that just look absolutely amazing. I'm gonna try to pull it up on the web.
Well, the Paizo blog today is dedicated to it.
Yeah, the Paizo blog today. Go check it out. And I'm hoping, I got it up on screen. So they've got these massive, awesome layouts. This is going to be a book that you have, and it's got all this reference stuff. And some of them are class specific, so it has like all the rules for your class is in the book, as well as the character sheet and journal pages and stuff. If like for a character you really love or you know you're going to be playing a while, it might be a great little investment.
You know, I thought this was a coffee stain on the first page, but no, it's like some kind of arcane rune.
They were drinking it really strong. Actually, that's the same rune stock art that I use on Perram spellbook cards.
Huh. Oh, and nice.
I have also paid $25
they have
for that.
Death certificates.
Huh?
Nice Trace in chat is pointing out that they come with a death certificate for the character.
Indeed.
Oh man. Hopefully you won't need it, but if you do, you have it.
I mean, if you're going to commit an entire tome to this character, then you want to commemorate its entire adventure career, including any deaths that it has. So I want to shout out to a couple of things that are all network related. First of all, last week ended week 2 of our guest blog takeover. And so just if you haven't checked it out, you can go and check out from last week. Nick Logue did a fun contribution talking about his interactive improv group that he is assistant producing at the Windward Community College in Hawaii, where he lives, and how it just he talks a lot about how it relates to a theater experience that reminded of a role-playing game that actually eventually led to him getting married. It's a really sweet story and a really interesting premise for this theater experience that is now being done online because 2020. So I recommend people go and check that out. On Tuesday, Aaron Shanks from Paizo. He is Paizo PR. He is a huge asset to the No Direction Network. He helps coordinate all of our interviews and our review material. So like he helped make sure that we got the Lost Omens Pathfinder Society guides PDFs. He helped make sure Linda was on today's episode. Every episode that we put out has in some way been influenced by Aaron, and Aaron's never been on the show. He just gets referenced a lot. So I was really happy to make an exception where we usually don't invite Paizo staff to talk about the guest blogger takeover, because that's usually an opportunity to highlight people that don't usually get that attention. But Aaron, in that case, qualifies. So I was really glad that he came on and just talked a story about what role-playing games mean to him. Darren Caldemeyer. Darren Caldemeyer is a friend of the show. He is our official PaizoCon countdown correspondent. Every year when PaizoCon is coming, he provides us with graphics, letting people know just how many days it is until PaizoCon. it just becomes part of the thrill of PaizoCon coming. And the fact that we don't know the 2021 date of PaizoCon or even the status of it just means that we need to do something else with Darren this year. And so I had him come in, and he gave an essay about how you should always choose story over mechanics every time. Then we had James Gates, who is a writer. Oh, here, I described her as one of the cogs that makes the RPG industry go. And she talks about how fantasy and science fiction as genres are not nearly as old as you might think, that you could still sit down with some of the original authors and have coffee with them today. And she just talks about the common language that these two genres have provided us as geeks, and that we should just really appreciate that we are still within this kind of birth of a new genre that has become one of the most influential in just all forms of media. Thursday, Ben Looms from Sirenscape, the CEO and creative director of Sirenscape, he put together a blog about building a horror soundscape for tabletop RPGs. So when you get Sirenscape, people are probably familiar with this. You get the Sirenscape sound sets, but there's also a lot of options for customizing your own sound sets. And this is not even a feature that I have used, even though I should. Every time that I'm laying down the soundtrack for an episode of Adventurous, I'm like, I'm just going to use this one combination of sounds, but I really want this same feel. And he talks about how easy it is to make your custom sound sets. And not only that, he provides a discount code so that you can get the specific Strange Aeon sound set that he is using as an example in his step-by-step guide. And finally, on Friday, we have Mike Selinker from Lone Shark Games, and he is one of the designers of the Pathfinder Adventure card game. He is talking about sticking to game design. This is a critique he often gets when he gets political on his social media platforms, and with the new Kickstarter that he is promoting, which I am going to click on this link just to make sure I get the name right. But it's here somewhere. It's definitely, there we go. Game Theory in the Age of Chaos. And he also did an article recently for a reputable magazine that I do not remember the name of, but just talking about using game theory to predict certain outcomes in the near future. So anyway, yeah, Mike is someone that we always appreciate having on the show, as long as he is not trying to make us drink vinegar-based soda. So it was great to have him. Remember.
There's a story here.
There is a story. We don't have time. We'll talk about it another time.
Okay.
And finally, Sheppy, T.S. Rodriguez, the artist who did the Adventurous and Valiant artwork. He talks about the beauty of finding enjoyment in everything. And as soon as he turned this blog post over, I knew this was going to be the last one for the 2-week guest blogger takeover. It was just such a lovely read about how, as he was growing up, he used to be, feel like he was too cool for certain things and just would find joy in critiquing things. But he realized it wasn't really a sincere joy. And when you read about how much more fulfilling he found life when you're just looking for ways to find the good in things that you enjoy, it's just a really lovely piece. And it really kind of wraps up the whole intent of the guest blogger takeover so much. And it was not what I was expecting him to be turning over. So that was also a real treat. And yeah, I was really happy with it. And I was really happy with all of our guest bloggers that contributed to the last 2 weeks and helped give our regular bloggers a couple of weeks off to recover from still Gen Con, because we are still in that post-Gen Con review crunch that the network has to deal with until early October. So it's nice to get those couple of weeks off and to get these contributors who are coming in and providing us new things to think about and talk about. It's actually kind of like sitting down at Pathfinder Society table, where when you play with new people, you kind of get a refresher of how other people are gaming, and it influences what you are doing at the game table. And it kind of touches you and affects how you play the game going forward.
You know what that reminds me of, Ryan?
No.
It reminds me that if you're only watching the show or listening to the podcast, you're really only getting about half of the awesome, amazing content that is available on the No Direction Networks. Our selection of blogs and articles are absolutely fascinating, and we are privileged to have such great writers working for us, and especially now with such great guest writers coming in to do this. And if you want to find more of our amazing content and the fantastic material, you can do so at nodirectionpodcast.com, where you'll find Pathfinder, Starfinder, and other general nerdity. That is nodirectionpodcast.com. And while you're there, you'll be able to click on the Discord link the Discord link over on the right-hand side of nodirectionpodcast.com, which will take you to the chillest place to hang out and talk with us and fans of other Pathfinder content, other RPG content, and all the general nerdity that we get into. And while you're looking at that Discord link, you'll see another link. That is the Patreon link. It is only through the contributions of our patrons that we're able to continue to provide this content and keep growing and providing more and more high quality, better content to you all, the fans. We would appreciate anybody that becomes a patron. We appreciate every patron that's able to participate. And so thank you all very much. If you would like to become a patron, you can click on that link, pledge in, and we will very much appreciate it. And as a special bonus to our patrons, make sure that you all come after the show to the after party, where we will be chatting with all of our patrons and talking about exactly what you all want us to talk about, because that is what that segment is for. So right after we sign off here, we're probably going to take a minute to go grab a cookie or a drink. Critical Hit cookie. They are not sponsoring this. I just happen to get some more of those in, and delicious. And I'm thinking about grabbing a butterscotch one right now. And then go to the Discord, where you'll find the patron area and you can hang out with us in the after show.
Yeah, we are going a little late tonight, so it'll probably be a shorter Patron's Private Sanctum tonight, but we are definitely going to be doing that in a couple of minutes. One last thing I want to bring people's attention to: we are starting our Saturday content this weekend with something a little different for us, the Game Design Unboxed podcast. This is our first board game podcast. Episode 0 is launching this Saturday. Our patrons already got a preview of this first episode, so it's that same episode now going to be available to all listeners of the No Direction Network. So if you are not used to refreshing the No Direction feed on the weekends, just know that this is something that we are going to be experimenting with, and we're going with content that's a little different for us, but it's by my friend Danielle Reynolds, who people should be familiar with if you've listened to Geek Together in the recent past. And it's a great show, and Danielle is really a smart and influential person in the board game design space. And so I am really looking forward to the interviews that she is going to start bringing to the network by way of Game Design Unboxed. So until next time, Linda, thank you for joining us once again.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Perram.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.